Your life as every level of a corrupt military officer. You're sitting in a room with no windows and a recording device on the table and a JAG attorney across from you who has not smiled once in 40 minutes, and a file in front of her thick enough to use as a weapon. The file has your name on it, your rank, your service number. 22 years of decorated service compressed into a document that is not about the decorated part. She slides a photograph across the table, a bank account in a name that is not yours, but that you opened, a transfer, a number with enough zeros that the zeros become the whole story. She asks you to explain the number. You look at the photograph for a long time. You think about a Friday afternoon 18 years ago in a base in Virginia when a man named Garrett poured 2 glasses of bourbon at 4 in the afternoon and told you something that sounded at the time like advice, and that you now understand was an invitation to a room exactly like this one. You just did not know then that accepting the drink meant accepting everything that came after it. This channel goes inside the careers most people never see the inside of. Subscribe if you are new. Hit the bell. Now, let's go. Level 1. The Commission. You come in clean. This matters, and it is worth saying plainly because everything that follows will make it easy to forget. You come in clean, with the specific idealism of someone who chose this over other options, and chose it for reasons that had nothing to do with money or advancement, or the things you will later tell yourself justified the decisions you made. You scored in the top 4% of your officer candidate class. You were commissioned at 23 and assigned to a logistics battalion, and you are good at the work, in the particular way that some people are good at things that look like administration from the outside and are actually about moving enormous quantities of material across difficult terrain under conditions that punish every error. You are precise, reliable. Your efficiency reports said things that efficiency reports do not usually say. You believed in the institution. Not naively. You understood the institution had weight and history, and that weight and history included things that did not belong in the brochure. But you believed in the mission beneath the institution, and the mission felt real, and the feeling kept you going through postings and separations and the specific grind of a military career that asks for everything and offers in return a salary that does not reflect the asking. You watched colleagues leave for the private sector at year 8, year 10, year 12. You watched them walk out with institutional knowledge and security clearances, and the kind of resume that defense contractors pay serious money to acquire. You understood the calculus. You chose to stay. That choice felt like integrity at the time. It may have been integrity. Or it may have been the first indication that you were exactly the kind of person Garrett spent 26 years learning to identify. Someone who stayed because the institution meant something to them, which meant the institution was something they could be made afraid to lose. Your first posting under Garrett arrives 18 months in. He has run the procurement division of the Logistics Command with the efficiency of someone who learned long ago exactly how much of any system is visible to oversight and exactly how much is not. Respected, connected. When he is in a room, the room adjusts without knowing why. He takes an interest in you. He does not name what the interest is. He includes you in meetings you are slightly junior for. He routes decisions through your desk that your rank does not strictly require. He is teaching you something without calling it teaching. The bourbon on the Friday afternoon comes at the end of year 2. He pours. He talks about the procurement review that just concluded. He mentions a number. He mentions what the number represents in the context of relationships the division has maintained for a decade. He looks at you in the specific way someone looks when they are testing whether you are going to ask the next question or let it pass. You let it pass. That is the first decision. It feels like nothing at all. Level 2. The Favor. The first time is small enough that you can call it something else. A procurement decision, 2 competing bids for a logistics software contract, roughly equivalent in capability, marginally different in price. Garrett suggests a preference. He does not explain it. You process the paperwork. The preferred bidder wins. A week later, Garrett mentions a box at a stadium for the upcoming game, that you and your wife should use it. You use it. Your wife has a good evening. You tell yourself this is how relationships work in institutional life, the informal economy of favors and access that exists in every large organization, and that nobody talks about because everybody participates in it, and the participation is distributed widely enough that it does not feel like what it is. This is the rationalization. You will use it many times. You will get better at it each time you use it. The favors become a pattern, a word put in for your next posting, better location, better assignment, the kind of positioning that takes other officers twice as long to achieve through the official process. A conference invitation to a venue that costs more than your monthly salary to stay at. A connection to a private attorney who handles a personal legal matter at a rate that does not reflect the market for attorneys of his caliber. Each one arrives without a price tag. Each one carries a price. You understand this without articulating it, because articulating it would require you to look at it directly, and looking at it directly would require a decision you are not ready to make. Garrett never asks for anything explicit. He never has to. You are processing paperwork. You are making recommendations. You are the person who touches decisions before they become official. And the touching has started to carry a gravity that bends outcomes in directions that correspond consistently to relationships Garrett maintains with contractors you are beginning to recognize by name. By year 4, you know what you are doing. You tell yourself you are not doing it. The distance between those two things is where the real corruption lives, not in the decisions themselves, but in the sustained daily effort of not naming them accurately. There is a version of this story where you stop here, where the stadium box is the ceiling, a soft ethical line crossed once and not again, a compromise absorbed and contained, a single lapse in an otherwise clean career. People make that version of this choice every day inside large institutions and live entirely unremarkable professional lives and retire with their records intact. You do not make that version. You make the version where the stadium box is the floor. Level 3. The money. It becomes money in year 6. Not suddenly, the way a river changes course. Slowly, then the banks give way and the new direction looks like it was always there. A defense contractor approaches you through an intermediary at an industry conference. The intermediary is not clumsy. He has done this enough times that the conversation never sounds like the conversation it is. He talks about consulting arrangements. Companies in this sector retain active and former officers as advisors. The arrangement is not unusual on its face. There is paperwork. There is a structure. It looks from the appropriate distance like something a compliance department might review and approve. What it actually is, you are being paid to ensure decisions travel in the right direction. Your name does not appear on the contract. A numbered company appears on the contract. The numbered company has a bank account in a jurisdiction that does not ask questions. The bank account receives transfers on a schedule that corresponds to nothing in any official record. The first transfer is $40,000. You sit in your car in a parking structure for 20 minutes after you check the balance the first time. Not from guilt. The guilt is present, but it is not what holds you still. What holds you still is the specific, irreversible understanding that the person who entered the officer candidate class 20 years ago and came in clean is no longer the person sitting in this car, that a line has been crossed that does not have a crossing back. You drive home. You do not tell your wife. You tell yourself you will stop after this one. You know, sitting in the car before you even start the engine, that you will not stop after this one. You know it the way you know other things you do not say aloud, fully and from the inside, and with no mechanism for changing the knowledge by refusing to speak it. Garrett, when you mention the arrangement obliquely over drinks, nods once and says nothing. His nod is not approval. It is acknowledgement. The acknowledgement of a man who has watched this specific moment happen before, and who understands that what comes next is not his responsibility to manage. Level 4. The network. By year 10, you are a lieutenant colonel, and the network has a shape,
not a conspiracy. Conspiracies have meetings and records and people who think of themselves as conspirators. The network has none of this. The network is a set of relationships maintained through mutual benefit, each node understanding its own position without being shown the full architecture, each transaction structured to resemble the legitimate thing it most closely approximates. You know 4 contractors by their personal numbers. You know 2 other officers inside the procurement system whose decisions align with yours with a consistency that would be statistically remarkable if anyone were running the statistics. You know Garrett, who sits above all of it with the stillness of someone who built the room you were standing in and has been standing in it long enough that the room feels like the natural order of things. The money is not the point anymore. This surprises you, not that you became corrupt, but that the corruption stopped being about the money relatively quickly. The money continues arriving, the numbered company has a balance that makes you briefly dizzy when you log in. But what the corruption is actually about by year 10 is position. Your career is moving faster than your ability alone would move it. The right postings, the right evaluations, the right connections materializing at the right moments. And the moving of it has become the thing you are protecting. And the protecting requires the maintenance of the relationships that enabled it. And the maintenance requires that you keep doing what you have been doing. The corruption is self-sustaining. It no longer requires justification. It requires management. You become very good at management. You also become something you did not plan to become. The kind of officer whose reputation in certain circles carries a specific meaning that has nothing to do with your efficiency reports. The contractors know you. The intermediaries know you. The other officers in the network know you in the way that people in a network know each other, through the quality of decisions made and the reliability of outcomes delivered, and the complete absence of any conversation in which any of this is named directly. You are trusted, in a world that runs on a particular kind of trust. The fact that this trust is the opposite of the trust the institution placed in you at commissioning does not produce the cognitive dissonance you might expect. It produces something closer to compartmentalization, the professional skill of keeping separate things separate, which the military trains you into from year 1, and which turns out to be equally applicable to keeping the version of yourself that exists in the official record separate from the version that exists in the network. You are very good at compartmentalization. You always were.
Level 5. The cover. The audit arrives on a Tuesday. Routine, a procurement sweep on a 3-year cycle. The people inside the system learn to read these 18 months in advance. You have been preparing. The preparation reveals what the corruption actually required all along, not just the decisions, but the documentation layered beneath them. The construction of a paper record that supports outcomes without exposing process. The specific skill of making the inevitable look like the result of legitimate deliberation. You are good at this. 20 years of logistics work means 20 years of understanding how records are built and how they are read, and where the gaps between building and reading create spaces that can be filled with something other than what actually happened. The audit finds nothing that rises above minor procedural irregularities, the kind that accumulate in every high-volume procurement division across 3 years and that are noted and filed and forgotten. Garrett says, "Clean work." But one of the auditors, a young captain from a different command assigned to the review team, asks a question during a document examination that is more specific than the questions the audit is designed to ask. He asks it once, receives an answer that satisfies the official record, does not ask it again. You watch him for the remaining weeks of the review. He does not return to the question, but the question stays in you, because the right question means someone has the capacity to ask it, and the capacity exists somewhere in the record, and the record is not as clean as you believed it was when you sat in the parking structure with $40,000 in a numbered account and told yourself you would stop. You increase the distance between your name and the company. You restructure 2 contractor relationships. You move money through 3 additional steps. The cover gets thicker.
The cover getting thicker is precisely what eventually produces the file on the table in the room with no windows, because every layer you add is another layer someone can find, and the finding of one layer always leads to the next one underneath it. Level 6. The investigation. You find out through a lawyer, not yours, a colleague's attorney, handling an unrelated matter who mentions in passing that a name has appeared in a referral from the Inspector General's office. The name is not yours. It is adjacent to yours, the way names in networks are always adjacent, connected through documented decisions and institutional relationships that look innocuous at the individual transaction level and do not look innocuous when someone lays them end to end across 18 years. You call Garrett. He answers on the second ring. Garrett almost never answers on the second ring. He says, "I know." You ask what you should do. He is quiet for a moment. That is precisely the length of a man who has already made his decision and is deciding how much of it to share. He says, "That depends on what you're willing to lose." 3 months later, Garrett's attorney contacts the Inspector General's office, and Garrett becomes the most cooperative witness in the investigation in exchange for considerations you are not made aware of until it is too late for the awareness to change anything. The network protects itself by identifying its most exposed members and offering them to the process before the process finds them independently. You are more exposed than Garrett. You were always more exposed than Garrett. He designed it that way. The design was the thing you mistook for mentorship across 18 years of dinners and briefings and bourbon at 4 in the afternoon. The design was always the relationship. The relationship was always the design. And you were inside it the entire time, moving freely, believing you understood the architecture in a room that Garrett built and that only Garrett knew the exits to. The agents arrive on a Wednesday with credentials and a document listing what they are there to collect. Professional, courteous, completely without warmth. You watch them box your files and your computer and 2 years of documentation that you believed was protected. You call your attorney. She says, "Do not speak to anyone until I arrive." You say, "How bad is it?" She says, "I'll be there in 40 minutes. That is your answer.
Level 7.
The room. The photograph is still on the table. The bank account, the transfer, the number. The JAG attorney across from you has spent 23 years prosecuting military fraud cases, and she has heard every version of the explanation you are about to give, and she knows before you open your mouth which category yours belongs to. You think about Garrett. You think about the bourbon and the stadium box and the first transfer and the audit you passed and the cover you built and the 22 years of service about to be read backwards through everything in this file. You think about the officer candidate class, the top 4%, the efficiency reports, the person who chose this for reasons that had nothing to do with money. You think, I was that person. And then you were that person until the Friday afternoon. After the Friday afternoon, you were becoming something else. And becoming happened across enough time and enough small decisions that you could always point to the distance between where you stood and where the line was, and the pointing at the distance was how you kept moving toward the line without ever deciding to cross it. The decision was made before you understood you were making it. In every drink accepted, in every favor processed, in every document touched in a direction that served a relationship rather than a requirement. 200 decisions that were all the same decision, made across 18 years in offices and conference rooms and parking structures and stadiums and hotel bars, dressed as mentorship, as networking, as the way things work, as the informal economy that everyone participates in and nobody names. Named now. On a table in a room with no windows and a recording device and an attorney who has not smiled once in 40 minutes because she has read the file and she knows what is in it and she knows you know what is in it. Your attorney puts her hand briefly on your arm. You look at the photograph. You look at the number. You open your mouth. The recording device registers everything from this point forward. It was registering before you arrived. It will continue until the room decides it is finished. The room is not finished. Not yet. If this one stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to see it. This channel goes inside the decisions most people never face. Subscribe if you are new. The bell is there when you're ready. The file is still open. The recording device is still running. The photograph is still on the table.